Welcome everyone. Kevin and I are back with another Financial 15. We're going back to credit score, specifically looking at tips to improve your credit. We got 6 of them, so you definitely want to stick around. Lots of great information.
What is a credit score? How do you check your credit score? Today, we're going to talk about tips to improve your credit score. These are big things that you should know so you can try and help yourself down the road, because a lot of things are on there and you don't want to deal with it otherwise. Best way to look at these things, go to our YouTube channel and subscribe. Great tips there that you can find, as well as videos, or like us on Facebook. Most importantly, please go to our website at beckerorr.com. Blogs, events, YouTube videos, you name it, we've got it on there. Lots of information for you. But today we are dealing with 6 tips to improve your credit. We know what it is. We know where the credit bureaus are. Clint, what are some of the tips that we should be looking at if we want to get our credit better going forward?
That's right. You mentioned the credit bureaus, other parts there. We've done other videos on that, so you can definitely check out those other videos to get that information. Today's 6 tips to improve your credit. We'll dive right in. Tip number 1 is you really have to understand the calculation, right? You have to know what the credit bureaus are looking at, so then you know what it is to improve. So understanding the calculation is key. We'll go through a couple of the details here, Kevin. This is one model from Equifax, so let's not pretend that all of them follow the exact same model. That is not the case. Within the same credit bureau, in fact, there could be different models that they use, but this is one general model from Equifax. Gives us a good idea of what's important when it comes to the credit score. And you'll notice the biggest piece, Kevin, 35% of the weighting in the credit score, it is the payment history. And I think that makes a bit of sense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the biggest one is, are you paying off your credit cards? Have you paid off all your previous debt? That's a huge factor to judging your credit score. If you're constantly late or delayed or you miss payments, that's not going to go over well. So your payment history should be a significant part of your credit score, but it's not the only one. The other factor would be used credit versus available credit. And again, as this states, how much of the total available credit is being used on your cards and lines of credits. And also, are you maxing it out and then just paying the minimum, or are you paying it off monthly? So again, that's how much also is being put on it. If you have a $5,000 limit, are you putting $5,000 on, or are you putting $500 on? The amount you use and how it's used against what you've got as an available scenario, that also dictates how well your credit's going to be. So as they say on this credit score here, that's about roughly a 30% scenario judged for the Equifax side.
Yeah, and that's 65% between the two. So these two are definitely important. They're big parts of the overall credit score according to this Equifax model. And again, they're looking at trends here. So if you miss one payment, your payment history is not shot. It's more about the overall trend. And same thing with the usage. If you take it to the max of your available credit once, that's not the end of the world. But if you're constantly using the bulk of your credit, that could be an issue that could work against you in terms of your score. A few more quick issues here. The other parts of that puzzle, the credit history, is also important, 15% weighting in this model. Important here, the credit history has to do with how long you've had a credit account open. So if you've only had a credit card for a couple of months or a year or two, well, that'll actually work against you. If you've had one for 20 years, well, that's probably a plus, assuming you've managed it responsibly. But the length of time, the more history they have on you, the better. That's really the idea. You don't want to have a short window, longer credit history, better. Public records, you can see about a 10% weighting there. That's really anything that's publicly available that could be used in your credit score. For example, like a bankruptcy, that's a publicly available data point they can grab, and it would be relevant to calculating a credit score. And then the last one here, Kevin, I'll let you go through at about 10% weighting. Inquiries. This is a common question. Does checking my credit impact my credit?
Yeah, and again, the checking your credit scenario all depends basically on whether are we making a hard inquiry or are we making a soft inquiry. And the basic difference between those soft inquiries, you're going to Credit Karma or something like that, and you're just checking what your score is. You're not actually doing a filing of any format to apply for credit of some format. So that's called a soft inquiry, and that really doesn't have any effect going forward. But your hard inquiries do. Now I'm applying for a loan. I want to finance a car. I want to buy a house. These are all things. It's applying for a credit card. They are called hard inquiries, and they do affect your credit score. The number of these that you do, depending on how often they're done, will affect your score quite significantly if you're doing them once a month or things along those lines. So depending on what kind you're doing, one will affect it vastly. The other one will have limited effect at all.
Correct. Yeah. So we just have to keep that in mind. But that first tip, make sure you have an understanding of what goes into that credit score so you know what to look for. The second tip, get a good idea of where you are today so you can check your score. There's ways you can do that for free in Canada without impacting your credit. We've done a whole video on that, so I encourage you to go check that one out. And then the goal here, you have a good idea of your starting points. You know what it is you need to work with. If your number's already high, no need to worry. Or another item here, you want to look for inaccuracies, right? If there's issues, maybe you move, they don't have the correct address, maybe there's a missed payment that's really not a missed payment, or anything of that nature, you want to clear that up. And checking your score, getting your credit file, you need to do that first before you can start to clear up that inaccuracy. So that's number 2. Number 1 was to make sure you understand the calculation. Number 2, check your score. I'll let you do number 3 here, Kevin. Has to do with limiting the number of hard hits in your credit report. Walk us through that. What's that all about?
Yeah, I mean, basically, as I just mentioned in the inquiry thing, it's either a soft inquiry or a hard inquiry. And hard inquiries are the ones that count against your credit score. So you want to limit the number of times that you apply for credit. You do not want to be taking every single option when the credit card company sends you something in the mail. You get one once a month, and if you keep applying for these, that is going to have a big factor on what your credit score is. Now, if you're going for a loan, though, or say you're looking at a mortgage, if you go to a variety of different places over the course of, say, 2 weeks, they're going to combine that all as one because they understand the fact that you're really just getting different rates that you can look at and whether you qualify at different institutions to be able to get this mortgage. So they're not going to ding you for each time you do that in a short period of time. We generally look at that 2-week phrase. But again, if you're doing it once a month, then you're going to have a little bit more of a hard problem going on there. And again, big thing, apply for credit only when you need it. Just because you have the credit card offer does not mean you need the credit card. If you already have one or two, chances are you probably don't need the third, even if they're trying to perk you with other odds and ends, because the more credit cards you have, that's going to have an effect on your overall credit score going forward as well. So remember, check the number of hard checks. That's tip number 3.
Yeah, you want to control that for sure. And that 2-week interval you talked about is important to know, right? Because sometimes the folks are shopping around. Maybe they get in a house and they're trying to get the best deal on a mortgage. They might be concerned, well, if I go apply for too many of them, all these checks will actually limit my score. If you do it in a short window, it doesn't actually impact the score. So you do have the ability to shop around and make sure you get a good rate when it is time to get credit. But good points there on tip number 3. Let's get into the next tip. And this has to do with how to lengthen your credit history. Now, keep in mind, we just went through how the credit score could be calculated, and now we're zooming in on pieces of that and how you could improve them. And this is a key one here, lengthening your credit history. So every time you open a credit account, so let's say you have a new credit card, a line of credit, a car loan, mortgage, whatever it is, the longer it's in use, the better. If all your credit accounts are fairly new, that could actually have a negative impact on your score. And this could come into play, for example, if you're doing a transfer. Let's say you had a credit card, you get a new deal in the mail, and it says, hey, low introductory rate, so you just transfer the balance over to that new one. Well, that old one with all the history is now gone, and you now just have that new credit card, or in this case, a new credit account. So you have less history. That could have a negative impact. So it might make sense. Maybe you transfer the balance, but you keep that old card around and use it from time to time. So you still have a long window of history. So keep in mind what they're looking for is they want to see a history, a long one preferably, of you being responsible with credit, making payments on time. And if you don't, if you have a very short history, that could actually be a negative in the credit score. So you have to keep those transfers in mind because it could end up having a negative impact on your overall credit. So that was the tip number. Are we at number 4 or number 5, Kevin?
That was 4. We're now, I believe we're now on number 5.
Okay, number 5. I'm glad you're counting. Number 5, tip number 5, there it is, has to do with your credit usage.
Yeah, keeping your credit usage low is the big thing. I mean, you want to be able to have credit, but you don't want to really max out your credit all the time. The having things and using it at a certain period of time is great. But if you're constantly going to that maxed out view all the time, that's not going to look good on your credit score because they're wondering, well, why are you constantly living there? That's a big factor going forward. So if we take a look at the example we've got below, if you have a credit card with $5,000 on the limit, line of credit with 25, and the average borrowing amount you've got is 15, well, that's 50% of the credit that you're using all the time. That's a fairly significant amount. Now, it's not 80 or 90, but by the same token, it's not 20 or 30. Whereas in number 2, if your limit is 10 and your average line of credit is 40 and you're only using 15, well, that's 30% of the limit. So even though you're getting into it, you're not using as much as the credit total that you have there. So the limited usage or the smaller amounts that you use, that's actually better for your credit score going forward. The last thing you ever want to do is constantly be closer to the max or constantly have it going up and up. The lower the usage, the better your credit rating going forward.
Yeah, so it might be worthwhile to consider actually having a higher limit on your existing credit and using less of it than having a lower limit and always bumping up against that ceiling, right? So items to keep in mind if you're trying to improve your credit score, this is definitely one of them. Tip number 6 here, this might sound a little too simple, but it's a big factor. Pay the debts on time. That was the biggest piece. Remember that payment history is the biggest piece of the credit model we looked at. So that as a key, right? And again, 1 or 2 times you're late, not the end of the world. That's not really not what they're looking for. They're looking for an overall trend. But if you have a trend consistently missing or being late on payments, that'll definitely work against you. So ideally, you only take on credit you can, and you clear up any bad debt right away. Like you don't let that become a habit. So tip number 6 sounds simple, but is very key. Make sure any debt you take on, you're able to handle the payments and make them on time. I know we said 6, Kevin, here, but I think we got a bonus tip here. And this sounds funny when I'm saying bankruptcy as a bonus, but important information for people to know, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically the big thing, a lot of people, whether or not you want to declare bankruptcy, maybe you have 5 or 6 credit cards, you've maxed them all out, you don't know whether you can get yourself out of that. I mean, whether you work with somebody who's going to get you out or not, if you declare bankruptcy, one thing to remember is that bankruptcy stays on your credit record for 7 years before it's disappeared. 7 years. Not only that, but it drops you to the lowest credit rating possible. So your odds of being able to get a mortgage, get a car loan, or some of these other odds and ends probably disappear completely beyond having any access to that for the next 7 years. So it is definitely something that you have to look at seriously before considering saying, oh, well, I'll just get bankrupt and then I can go back and do it tomorrow. Well, after bankruptcy, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get any credit again for the next little while. So really know that that's something that you want to try and avoid, or at least talk with a tax accountant or a professional in that manner before deciding to declare.
Yeah, it's on your record for 7 years, and then after that, it's almost like restarting. So you got to be building it up. So certainly a big decision, one not to take lightly. If you do have additional questions, we're always happy to chat, happy to help out. You can get a hold of us at chatwithclintonandkevin.com, and you can see it on the bottom of the screen. So please go there as part of our website, fill in the form. Would love to hear from you. Any parting comments for the folks, Kevin?
No, I think that's 6 plus 1 or tips to improve your credit. Make sure that you review them all the time before, so that you don't have to worry about any credit problems down the road. That's everything that I can think of. So until next time, I bid you adieu.
Take care.